Our LSU has come to the voice of college football. We got Carter here breaking down the Bayou Bengals coming off a pretty decent win. I guess, they got by.
Huh? Huh? Huh?
That
Huh?
was crazy. So you were there. Tell us about the scene. Tell us about the vibe.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Like people that go to every single game, and I've been to a lot. They say that that's top 5 game, and that's truly crazy because when it comes to home games, there's not many teams in college football that has the schedule that LSU has and has all these big time SEC opponents that come to Tiger Stadium, right? And it truly was a transcendent out of body experience. With the fans rushing the field, and right after the game ended, Mark, a big fog hit Tiger Stadium. All of it was just truly insane, and you give Brian Kelly and Jaden Daniels a lot of the credit, and a bunch of true freshmen that really made big plays when it mattered the most.
LSU is big time historically, but this coach combined with this quarterback, this team has not pulled off a win like this. We know what Saban's done. So if you're sitting at home, you're just expecting Bama to make the play, Bama to close it out, but they didn't. So how did LSU get it done?
What's funny, Mark, is, Alabama did make the plays, right? Bryce Young made arguably the best play of his career to escape the pass rush for LSU that is just dominated that entire game, really. And Bryce Young really willed that team to an almost victory, right? He had to overcome some questionable 2-point conversion decisions from his coach. He had to overcome some questionable defensive plays from the opposite side of the football. His wide receivers just, quite frankly, weren't getting open, and Bryce Young did Bryce Young things, and he kept making plays. He made plays in overtime as well. But this is what was really interesting, was Brian Kelly's decision to go for 2 in the win, right? And a lot of teams don't do that. They want to extend the game and kick the extra point and keep it going. And ironically, I think of some of the big time decisions that coaches have made after the first overtime, whether to go for 2 in the win or kick the extra point and continue on. And I think about a few things, Mark. I know you're a college football, historian. Today is the anniversary of the 4th and 25 play, the Hunter Henry heave, right, versus Ole Miss. And what a lot of people forget is after that, Arkansas still had to go and score. And after that, Brett Bielema decided to go for 2 in the win, and they got it. And you go to last year, how about a guy who just got fired, Brian Harsin? He decided to not go for 2 in the win. And they obviously kicked the extra point, they extended, and they eventually lost. I'm a big believer in going for 2 in the win when you have the opportunity to do so as quickly as possible, because overtime's a random in and of itself. If I have the opportunity to go out and make the game-winning play and keep the Heisman Trophy winner on the sideline, that decision by Brian Kelly was so genius, Mark, because it didn't allow Bryce Young to come back into the game and potentially win the game. So it's always very interesting, that thought process, and Brian Kelly making the decision to go for 2 in the win and call the game-winning play for a 3-star true freshman tight end who had just made, the other big touchdown catch, was truly freaking incredible. But now, Mark, we look at the whole shebang. Yeah, you got the SEC West. You got a lot of interesting dynamics at play in what, to me, Mark, has been, and I'm not just saying this because my team is in it, but I think you can objectively say this, since the college football playoff has been in place, this is by far the most fascinating SEC West battle ever, because Alabama's now out of it, and now it's going to come down to LSU and potentially Ole Miss.
It's a calculated risk to go for 2 there. So it's a risk. Obviously, your kicker makes, I'm saying a kicker, not necessarily the LSU kicker, makes, 98, 90%, 99% of those PATs to extend the game versus, I think from the 2-point or from the 2-yard line, the 2-point conversion is something in the less than 50% category. But if you believe in the momentum, the juice, it's the moment, you believe in your quarterback to make the right decision. If there's a decision to be made, that was obviously a called play. Bam, that's your guy, Taylor at the pylon. then you believe in your play, you believe in the execution of the guys involved, and that's the decision to make. You would wonder, though, had that play not gone, the PAT against Florida State in the opener, against LSU in the opener, that Brian Kelly's making that call. Who knows? But it was the right one to make. Yeah.
You never know. And it's interesting because, Nick obviously made two point conversion decisions. The first one made sense. Go kick the extra, go for 2 to go up by 3 late. The second one I thought was, if you want to talk about history, the Nick Saban has obviously made the right call 90% of the time. The second 2-point conversion try, if there is any Alabama fans looking at this, what was really bad. And the thing is like, yes, your chart said go for it. And Mark, me, I'm a big analytics guy. I'm a big aggression guy. I'm a big, go for it kind of guy. But Alabama had been really struggling in the red zone. So for me, if it's 50-50 on my chart, whether to go for 2 or not, kick the extra point, because your team had been really struggling offensively in that condensed red zone area. And honestly, Mark, that's probably the most fascinating thing about Brian Kelly up to this point is, you bring up the Florida State game. And if you are an LSU fan, you might have thought of this already, but as someone that looks at this every day, and this has kind of, become, my career, if you will, the most fascinating thing is just how drastically different the team is from the Florida State game. And it's not necessarily, Mark, well, the team has gotten better. Everyone can see that the team has gotten better. It's that the people who played in the Florida State game are not the same people who are playing now at over half of the positions, right? The right tackle is different. Your best linebacker is different. Your defensive line is different. The very first series of the game, arguably your best defensive player is out for the year. The team is so different. And the sign of a good coach, Mark, is when you say, look, what we have right now sucks. What we have right now isn't good enough. What we have right now is not the roster that is good enough to win us an SEC West or have us competitive versus Alabama. So a lot of the personnel decisions that Brian Kelly has made have been good, but they're also bold, right? Like one of the players that he's benched and is buried on the depth chart was a guy that was voted a team captain by the team before the season even began. So doing those kinds of things are easy in the minds of a lot of us, but they're not as easy because you get to know these players and you see how hard they work to get that starting position. And the fact that they've made those decisions is really impressive.
I've got a suggestion, Carter. You may want to tweak your Twitter, and maybe this is, your opportunity to push Jaden Daniels for the Heisman. So I've noticed that on the Twitter. Yeah, JD5 for Heisman.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? And what's really interesting, Mark, is I don't think he should win the Heisman. I'm not saying that's the fan in me, right? There's other players that I would put above him because he has had some games where he's just not looked that great. But if there's ever been, the typical gritty quarterback, it's him. It's a guy who never gets hurt. This is a guy who honestly isn't the most gifted thrower of the football, but when it mattered the most, he was an amazing thrower of the football this past weekend versus Alabama. And of course, we're going to remember him for the runs he made in the Alabama game and the throw to Mason Taylor on the rollout to win it. But it was amazing, some of the throws that he made. He made a hard throw to Malik Neighbors on a line, a throw that he's been missing all year. And people that are familiar, they watch my film studies, and I say this ball needs to be on a line. When it mattered the most, he threw a ball on the line in a very tight window that Malik Neighbors made a very difficult catch over Elias Ricks to really get the offense moving in the fourth quarter. Then he threw a ball, obviously the Mason Taylor throw for the first touchdown before, overtime was big, but it was actually the throw before that to Kayshawn that drew a pass interference that was huge. That it's a slot fade, if you will, right? He had been missing that throw. He had not been back shouldering that throw. That time he did. It allowed Kayshawn to make a play on it, and it drew a big pass interference penalty. What's really interesting about Jaden Daniels, I'm sure, Mark, you hear this all the time. Player X is better as the game moves on. That is honestly, objectively true about Jaden Daniels. He'll miss a ton of throws early. he'll come out slow as a thrower. But as he gets into his groove, as the game moves on, as the game gets tighter, he gets better. And to me, he is the ultimate gamer at quarterback.
We got Carter here. You got to catch his YouTube channel. You see it right there, Power Hour LSU, right here on YouTube as he breaks down LSU in the SEC. And right now, it's all about LSU in the SEC Western Division. They control their own destiny. And, one more shot at this narrative of the entire season. And, Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley were the hires of the offseason, of course.
Yeah.
The Lincoln Riley one, I don't think really stirred people up in regards to outside the state of Oklahoma in regards to, okay, that makes sense. USC needs a premium coach. They got him. That makes total sense. The Brian Kelly had its critics and detractors versus his people that obviously supported the decision. Then when they come out and lose a game against Florida State, and this shows you how fragile big-time college football can be. The Auburn game was teetering on the brink of disaster. The Florida game, they came back and made it a game. There were a couple points in the season where this could have went awfully bad. They kept it afloat. They kept fighting and grinding and getting better, and now it's come to fruition.
It has. And look, you give Brian Kelly a lot of credit. He's done a lot of things right. Obviously, the special teams has gotten tightened up. There's so many individual things that Brian Kelly has done, and he deserves all the credit. And on my live stream, I dedicated like the first 20 minutes of it of Brian Kelly making that decision to go for 2. He deserves a good chunk of, the positive juju for LSU to get things going. But honestly, before we wrap things up here, I wanted to, share some time talking about Harold Perkins. This is truly one of the best true freshman defensive talents we've ever seen in college football, any level. It's truly remarkable what he's done. And, he's getting a ton of Micah Parsons comparisons. And honestly, it's pretty accurate. What Micah Parsons did last year in his first year with the Cowboys is what Harold Perkins has done. And Mark, he's been arguably the best player defensively in the SEC this year. He's really been that transcendent. There's only a few guys I would take over him right now. Jalen Carter is probably one of those guys for Georgia, and Will Anderson was shut out outside of one big play early in the game. Perk has just been so good. He's been so good, and he has honestly transformed this LSU defense into something that honestly wasn't thought of, especially losing Mason Smith on the first drive of the game, the season versus Florida State. Perk is truly amazing, right? And when he was coming out, Mark, he was one of my highest graded players ever. He is like truly a transcendent athlete. He's got great ball skills. He's got great instincts. He's got great football IQ. I believe Brian Kelly described him as old school earlier in the year. He's just tough. He's gritty. And he is truly been the biggest difference maker on the defensive side of the football and arguably on the team because, Jaden obviously is the most valuable player on the team. He plays quarterback, but we knew Jaden was going to be a big part of this. Harold, who didn't play that much versus Florida State, they chose to not play him versus Tennessee. In all the other games, he's been a big piece. And notice LSU has won all those games. I don't think that's just a coincidence, right? He made so many big plays on Bryce Young this past weekend, and he's starting to really push himself into first-team All-American, level right now. So Perk has honestly been so big for this team.
So Carter, the concern is obviously the mountain top high, and then thud. Arkansas is struggling, but they still have KJ Jefferson at quarterback, Rocket Sanders at running back. There's talent there. There's some level of rivalry. There's an 11 a.m. lazy start on the road at Fayetteville, getting the team ready, getting them prepared. It's got all the makings of trap game. Even Vegas says this is only a 3-point game.
And it's going to be chilly. Right. This is something you can't prepare for chilliness. You just can't. You could play in the indoor facility and like turn the air conditioner on high. You just can't. Most of the players on LSU's team are from warm weather climates. It's a tough trap game. Honestly, Mark, I'm going to tell you this. I'm actually still a little hungover from this weekend, not from drinking. I didn't drink that much. It's just emotionally everyone felt the magnitude and how that game actually ended, it's tough. It's really tough to get ready to play a team that will smash you in the mouth. Arkansas's offensive line is obviously good. Sam Pittman has been one of the best coaches in the SEC. And, honestly, this is a really tough spot for LSU. And, yeah, I mean, look, I grew up in Arkansas, right? Golden Boot, means a lot to a lot of people. And it doesn't mean a lot to LSU fans, right? It's kind of become lower on the total poll for Arkansas fans. It is arguably the game they look most forward to in the entire year. So, yeah, that aspect of it. But Brian Kelly has, made this a big thing, right? He said, look, I'm not a good coach if I can't get my team ready to play. That's why you get paid the big bucks. Something else that's interesting, Mark, is, two big players on LSU's defense are transfers from Arkansas. And that's Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché. And Arkansas has two starters on their defense that are transfers from LSU, and Nudie McGlothern at corner and Lena Jackson onto the defensive line. So, there are some storylines here, and we'll see if the LSU defense and Jaden Daniels continues their good play in a hostile place.
Carter does an amazing job on his YouTube channel. Check it out, Power Hour LSU. Even if you're not an LSU fan, if you love the SEC and you're intrigued about college football matchups, film breakdown, and narratives, get on over there. Check out what Carter's got going. So I took all sorts of shots because I had, for as much as the College Football Playoff Committee had LSU at 10, and people were like, what is this? This makes no sense. It's complete LSU and SEC bias. I had LSU ranked number 8 before the Bama game. I said, this is a really good team. Put it all together. That's where I had them. I've got them up to 6 now. Obviously, it's all out in front of them, and they would be the first 2-loss team to make the playoff. But the SEC champion is not, in my opinion, going to get shut out of the college football playoff.
I agree. And to me, and as you pointed out in our last episode, I do have an SEC channel as well. The most interesting thing, Mark, is going to be Tennessee in all of this, right? If you're Tennessee, this becomes a very weird situation, especially if LSU wins out and wins the SEC. Tennessee will be sitting there, hey, we blew the brakes off of this team in their building. In a non-traditional, SEC non-cross division rival game. This is the most interesting race. It really is. The SEC has never been quite like this before. And man, I just love it. I freaking love the sport so much, Mark. I'm so freaking pumped up. And, for me, I actually, before this last week, I had UCLA ahead of LSU as well. I thought they were still a good one-loss team, and they had a tough loss versus Oregon. But now, LSU with one of the best wins in the SEC over Alabama this past weekend, it's hard to not, keep them up there. Honestly, they'll move ahead of Alabama, and obviously TCU is another interesting team. So look, Nostradamus, Mark, believing in LSU. I freaking love it. So yeah, I think if LSU wins out, I think they get in. I really do.
And then the College Football Playoff Committee has some serious issues on its hands because you look at the 3 in the SEC and you can't leave one of them out in favor of the other because they all have something else on the other team.
Yeah. And look, I don't know what's going to happen. I do think Georgia obviously separated themselves from everybody.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's just very strange, Mark, and I'll end on this, is for those that have not seen Jaden Daniels play, he's a very unorthodox quarterback in that he makes so many people miss. It is tough to get a good hit on him. And he is truly transcendent with the football in his hands. And I think of you think of all the great LSU skill guys, like Odell with the ball in his hands is special. Jamar Chase with the ball in his hands is special. Jaden is on their level when it comes to making people miss, extending plays. And if you go watch him, it's not really a vertical thing. He's like a slalom skier. It's a very unorthodox way. It's Lamar-esque, if you will, but even Lamar was a little bit more cut up the field than Jaden. He is such an interesting player. So especially when you juxtapose it with KJ Jefferson, who is basically a cam fullback. He's coming Tebow downhill at you. So it is so interesting. And then LSU is a very dangerous team right now.
LSU, just a 3-point pick by Vegas at Arkansas, should be interesting. Get on over to Carter's channel there, Power Hour LSU on YouTube. And again, the SEC channel. Where can we find that?
Power Hour SEC, man. I gotta chunk out more content on there. It's been so crazy, like going to the game. And this was kind of strange. Like my phone died. Like I filmed the final play and then my phone just went out. It was so weird, Mark, being disconnected. It was kind of blissful, right? Do you ever just turn your phone off?
Yes.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I was like, you know what? I don't have to film everything. I could just enjoy it, man. There's nothing like the sport, Mark. There's nothing freaking like it. Let's go.
Carter, appreciate it, man. I knew you were the guy to bring on here. I wanted to capture the moment as much as I could through you. And we will see what is in store for Brian Kelly and the boys the rest of the way. Thanks, Carter.
All right, buddy. Cheers.